If you look at most people's money regrets, they often start in their 20s. Things like getting into debt, not investing early, or just not paying attention to where their money's going. I'm currently in my 20s, and while I definitely don't have everything figured out, I've been really trying to be really intentional with the financial decisions I'm making now, because the habits I build in my 20s are going to affect the rest of my life. So in this video, I'm going to share 7 things I'm personally doing to try to avoid the common money mistakes in my 20s, especially here in the UK. Just to be clear, I'm not a financial advisor and I'm not claiming to be perfect with my money, but these are the simple strategies and habits I'm trying to use early in my life, in my 20s, so that hopefully the future may be grateful that I've started now. Let's start with the first one, which might be honestly the most important, and that's starting to invest early. The first thing I'm doing in my 20s is starting to invest early, even if it's not a huge amount. In the UK, one of the easiest ways to do this is using a stocks and shares ISA, and that lets you put up to £20,000 per year. And that's a big benefit, being that any gains you make on that will be completely tax-free. This is massive. The main reason I want to start investing now is something called compound growth. When you invest early, your money has time, years and years, decades even, to grow. And the returns you earn, even if they're not massive, will generate their returns over time as well. So each additional bit will generate a return on top of the return that's already been made. There's whole videos about this, and I'll produce some content talking about how beneficial compound interest is to your investing journey. But that means if you start investing in your 20s, even a small amount can be worth a lot more by the time you've invested it for 30, 40 years. And so it means you can start investing a little bit now instead of having to invest lots later down the line to try and catch up, essentially. So the goal of me right now isn't to invest massive amounts, it's just to be consistent and be in the habit of investing continuously. Because as I kind of increase my earning potential over time and have more free money to save potentially, I can increase that gradually over time. And this kind of feeds into the other points I'm trying to I will make further down the line in this video about how you can kind of free up some of that capital to invest into things like the stocks and shares ISA. And so that leads nicely onto my second point about it's really important to try and avoid lifetime inflation. And that's what I'm trying to do. This is where your spending increases every time your income increases. So, I may get a raise. I've been kind of promoted, changed jobs a few times in my career so far in my 20s. And, every time I've got a slight pay increase. I think it's important to not try and, you spend this money that you're gaining and actually see if you can kind of live within your means in your current way. So if I was pretty comfortable in my previous role, where I was being paid a certain amount that was less than what I'm being paid now, when you get promoted, not to try and use all that additional income to go out to eat, to go out to have drinks, to go on holiday, for example. So you want to try and use some of that money and invest it or save it in some other way so that it can potentially, grow for you and be useful down the line in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, for example. And this can kind of spiral on and on. Like you can get paid more, you can get a nicer car, that car costs more money, and it grows and grows and grows. Before you know it, even though you're earning more, you're not actually building wealth and you're actually just spending that additional income and not actually, you may have a nicer quality of life, but you're not actually building your wealth because you're spending it on things that you may, may be nice to do. And I'm not saying don't do that. It's always useful to go on nice holidays, but you want to be conscious about how much of your income you're actually spending on going on a holiday, on buying a car, on going out to eat, and making sure that you're being consistent about building that wealth. So one thing I'm actually trying to do is instead increase the amount I'm saving over time every time I get a pay rise. So I'm not going to put it all into my savings. I'm quite keen to kind of spend some of that on nice things like going out to do things in London, going on holiday. But every time I get an increase, being intentional that a proportion of that is going to immediately start going into my investments or my saving accounts. And if you're kind of intentional about that, so maybe set a percentage, of every time you get a pay rise, how much of that is going to continue to stay going into investments. You can kind of be intentional and stick to it. So step number 3 is probably one of the most important ones, and that's making sure you've got an emergency fund. The third thing I'm doing, and it's kind of running alongside all of this, is making sure that I'm continuously building some kind of emergency fund. An emergency fund is simply just money you've got set aside in a very safe account, so a interest savings account or some kind of cash ISA, and that's something that you can access very easily. And that's essentially for situations like losing your job, having to fix something, having to buy a new phone, unexpected bills, any kind of unexpected bills, or having to pay your rent for a few months. I think it's really important to try and have at least 3 to 6 months saved is what's recommended. I'm working towards that at the moment. I'm not there yet. But you just want to make sure that you're not just investing all your money into kind of stocks and shares that have the potential to go up and down and are quite volatile. You want to make sure you have a significant amount that you could live off in a relatively easy access, safe account. And life's unpredictable, especially in your 20s, especially with the job market at the moment. Jobs are kind of hiring, firing at will, especially in your 20s. And so if you have that emergency fund, it kind of gives you a bit of time to be able to, if you are made redundant or something big happens in your life, that you can actually kind of, you're not immediately panicking, you're not going into debt. Having that financial buffer gives you that peace of mind and flexibility. And that leads on to my fourth point. Make sure you're paying attention to your pension. I've made another video about this, but something in your 20s, it's pretty easy to ignore because it's not going to impact you for years, is making sure you're on top of your pension. And this is really important because it's something that you're not going to really think about now, but it's very easy to kind of just continuously pay into and will really save your life and stress when you reach retirement age. If you're employed in the UK, you probably are already automatically being enrolled into a workplace pension thanks to the 2008 Pensions Act. And that means both you and your employer, unless you opt out, have to pay into your pension. And so any money your employer is paying is essentially free money that they wouldn't be paying into your salary if you weren't part of that pension process. The minimum they have to pay is around 3%, but some employers will pay 5, 10% even. So it's important to make sure you look into that. And if the employer is offering to pay more, make sure you take advantage of that. This is something I took advantage of when I joined my current employer. If I upped my contributions, they would match that up to a certain point. And so that means I'm able to put in around 15%, which is a combination of my contributions and their contributions of my pension away a year, which is a really beneficial thing. And different employers will offer different things, but some will offer maybe above the minimum. And actually, my employer wasn't going to do that unless I specifically selected that on the options when I joined. So make sure you're on top of that, because it's something that it's a lot easier to save money if you never even see the money, and this money goes straight into my pension, builds up over time, and then hopefully it will be useful for me when I'm older. I think it's also really important, and I made a previous video about this, to make sure you're looking at what your pension is actually invested in. A lot of people have their pension put in fairly safe investments, which are designed to benefit the majority. But if you're on top of your finances and you want to be a bit more active in your investing journey and building towards your future, make sure you look into what your default pension's invested in from your workplace and potentially change it if you want to. As always, contact a financial advisor if you want real help with that. I can't give you recommendations about what you should actually invest in, but I think it's important to say that the default fund is honestly not probably going to give you the maximum returns that you could potentially get from something like a more global diversified index fund. And when you've got 40 years, it's potentially worthwhile being invested in something a bit more volatile, a bit more risky, but with the potential outcome of having higher returns. My next point is avoiding high interest debt. And this is really easy to fall into, especially if you don't have that emergency fund I was talking to earlier. If you get laid off or if you have a large expense coming up, it's very likely you're going to fall into some kind of debt. And these are things like credit card, buy now, pay later, which is particularly common in your 20s, and other kind of personal loans that you can get from the bank. Things like Klarna especially make it really easy to spend money you don't have. And while I have used that once or twice, I'm very careful not to default on these payments, because that's when it becomes really expensive. I think it's really dangerous if you're spending money you don't really have yet, and you have to be very careful. While I've got credit cards to help build my credit score, I'm very intentional about paying off them every month and not letting them grow and grow and grow. The thing is, credit cards can be useful, so it is important to use them. It's nice to have that large credit amount just in case something were to happen and to build your credit score, and to also use things like Amex and get a bit of cash back and other benefits. But just make sure, if you're able to, pay them off every month. Otherwise, you'll have the potential of spiraling into a kind of like debt spiral, which is when things get really difficult. If you start building bad debt, especially on things like credit cards or Klarna, you'll find it much harder to dig out of it, and you'll find it much harder to be able to save money over time. On to my sixth point, make sure you're doing a budget. Track where that money actually goes. I think one thing I've realized recently is that most people don't really pay attention to where they spend their money. The money comes in and they have to pay off their credit card, they have to kind of buy food, and they're not necessarily very intentional about it. They have the money, they spend the money. And it's very easy to kind of have that lifestyle creep take effect if you're not actively taking control of your budget every month. And that's why I have developed an Excel spreadsheet. I use an Excel spreadsheet to kind of track my spending, to make sure I'm kind of on track with my goals. If there's kind of any massive outliers, I can see that. If I'm spending too much on kind of takeaways or something like that, I can take action and deal with it straight away, so it doesn't keep on going and slowly creep up over time. And it makes you feel good, because it means I'm maintaining kind of my current lifestyle, and then I'm able to kind of actually identify how much money I'm going to be able to put away into my investments or into my savings account. And that honestly makes me feel pretty good that I have the ability to be able to do that. And I think honestly I'd only be able to do that if I was doing this budget and staying on top of it. I think especially like subscriptions and takeaways really add up to that. And I think the final step, which I'm going to plug my channel here, is just continuously learning about money. I'm quite active about learning. I listen to quite a few podcasts. I've read 1 or 2 books, and I'm making these videos for this YouTube. I mean, just the fact you're here already shows you're engaged vastly above a lot of other people. And I hope you can really join me on this journey to kind of develop, grow in my 20s as I get to my late 20s, kind of learn how to invest and take care of your finances. And if you want to be on that journey, make sure you like and subscribe and follow for more videos about taking control of your finances and building towards a better financial future. So I'm going to end with a question. What financial habits are you trying to build right now? Have any of these resonated with you? Tell me in the comments. If you found this video helpful, please like and subscribe. Stay tuned for more videos and follow me on this journey. Thank you.